forgiveness. I just had a daughter. I'm handling business. I'm still independent. I'm still in the trenches. While you still in the trap with that gun in your lap, like your heart got a vengeance. If business is business, and you fucking these women, I might need some repentance. I threw diamonds and pins.
Alright, man, so listen, man. Hood morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's your favorite host. It's your boy J.O. Gotta Chill. I'm here with my lovely co-host Val is.
Wait. Why are you the favorite?
I'm not the favorite.
You're the favorite now?
See, we can't even start over because this is live. You know what I'm saying? The hate is real. But guns, more guns. No, listen. We have a very wonderful episode today. On our Facebooks, we were noticing a lot of people, especially with everything that's going on right now in today's society, that black people are upset, and a lot of us are saying we should do something. But, you know, the question is what? A lot of people are saying, let's get armed, let's grab guns, let's go shoot some shit up. And I ain't gonna say I'm all for that, but I'm open to listen. But I think before we get into that, we gotta start with getting some information and figure out what the hell is actually going on and what we can and can't do. So we decided, let's bring it to the podcast.
So with that being said, we have an amazing guest here. His name is Wayne Brown. And I'm going to have to look at my notepad a little bit to get through this introduction because there's so much to say about this man sitting on the end of the table. He has almost 2 decades of experience in law enforcement. He's been a detective in New Jersey as well as a special agent with the FBI. As part of the FBI, he was on the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force's Elite Threat Response Unit, engaging with both foreign and domestic terrorists, including the Boston Marathon bombers, which I know everybody remembers. I sure do. My son was a baby when that happened. I'll never forget it. He's also been, he's both a state and FBI tactical firearms instructor, a former World Kickboxing Association Muay Thai boxer, a World Thai Boxing Association instructor, and a certified USA boxing trainer. Translation, don't mess with this guy.
Yeah.
I'm not even done. He's worked executive protection and security detail for the NBA and the NFL, as well as Fortune 100 executives and many others. And I say this is the most important thing. He's also a loving husband and father of 2 adorable kids.
You should probably lead with that first next time before you talk about all the ass. Basically, all I heard was he'll fuck you up, he'll fuck you up, he'll fuck you up, and he will fuck you up.
And then he's going home to the kids.
Right. How do you explain that? Daddy, what did you do today?
And of course, he's the lead instructor of GRMTAC, which stands for Green Monster Tactical. That's GRMTAC, Green Monster Tactical. I got me a little shirt right here. It says, "Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back."
Okay.
That's from.
Yeah, that's our John Wick shirt. Yeah.
John Wick, classic movie.
So I know I just went into kind of a lengthy synopsis of your background, but tell us a little bit more things to kind of fill in the blanks on things that I may not have mentioned that people may find interesting, and tell us a little about your company.
Okay. Well, first, thanks for having me on. This is a great opportunity to get information out to people, and to hear my bio said by somebody else is really nice because usually it's just me saying what I've done, but to hear somebody else say it almost makes it real, so thanks. I started Green Monster Tactical when I was still active with the United States government because I have some interest in design, so I was doing apparel and things like that. I could not at that time train civilians with regard to tactics and law enforcement type issues because it's a conflict of interest. The government feels that the knowledge is, so sensitive that while you're active, you can't train people. I don't agree with that, but it was what it was. Mm-hmm. So once I left the government and went back to the private sector, I was free to pursue my interests in terms of training. Since I already had a brand and a company established, I just filter my training and my tactics through that company. So now we do design and apparel, but we primarily are focused on training and arming citizens and educating people about both guns and self-defense, because I'll say guns may not be for everybody, but I prefer that people make an educated choice about whether guns are for you or not, rather than listening to a lot of the misconceptions you hear in the media, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
Yeah, we definitely will get into some of the misconceptions and things, and we also thank you for being here today and presenting your expertise and your knowledge and everything. But I think we really want to know. I mean, I'll let you ask, because I know it's a question that's been burning on your mind.
I could have probably taught this, with all the knowledge I got in the streets. You know what I'm saying?
Practical knowledge, right?
Right. Grand Theft Auto, you know how I go. I feel like, so obviously you are pro guns, and I just kind of want you to get into why, because my kind of logic on it is guns are cool, I get it, but if we didn't have them, if we just took guns away, like a lot of the stuff that happens wouldn't happen. It'd be, Ray Ray got his ass whooped, but it wouldn't be, Ray Ray got shot. Like, you know what I mean? It'd be a different outcome if nobody had them. That's just my opinion, but
That's true, and that's a good point. I think some of that speaks to the fact that you have countries that are not gun culture type countries, like say like a Singapore, like they don't allow guns in at all in Singapore. You get caught with a gun, they're chopping off your hand, or you might get the death penalty. I'm not sure which it is, but either way, it's not a good outcome, right?
Hell no.
In the U.S., we're sort of unique because we were founded based on revolution and guns. We needed guns to secure our freedom from Britain because we didn't want them to rule us anymore. So that set into place a cycle of events that would ingrain guns into our culture. The reason I'm so pro-gun is that in my experience in law enforcement, I realized I got into that career to help people. And I realized that I can't save you, meaning that I can help you once something bad happens to you and you report it, but I'm not going to be there when you need me to save your life. And neither is any other police officer. I mean, unless something happens to go down right in front of them. If you call us, we're coming, and we're coming as fast as we can. But nationwide average, right, police response time is about 12 to 14 minutes. A violent assault, a home invasion, any type of violent encounter where your life is in danger is going to be minutes, it's going to be seconds, it's going to be 50 seconds, it's going to be 2 minutes or something like that. So even if you could get to the phone right when it starts, we're not going to be there until it's over, right? And that's why we're making the chalk outline and taking the reports and doing the investigations, and we're bringing the EMTs. So it's incumbent that people know how to defend themselves and their families. In that meantime, that those 10 minutes, 12 minutes, you've got to survive. You got to get your family to survive if something bad happens.
But why not tasers? Why not less lethal means?
Big ass bats.
Yeah, a bat, something like that.
Good points. And some of those things do have good applications. However, they're not the most effective weapon. And when you take it from this perspective, when a crime happens against you, you are behind the curve because you and the criminal didn't both decide, okay, ready, go. We're going to start at the same time. You hear a noise at 3 o'clock in the morning and your window's broke and you're asleep. You might be in your pajamas and naked, I don't know. But you're behind the curve. Or if somebody assaults you on the street or wherever you may be, you now have to react and catch up because you weren't in the mind frame of, even if you were very self-aware, even if you're environmentally aware, that helps. But you can't always be aware of all things, right? So by the time someone is on top of you and a crime is being committed or your house has been compromised, you're behind the curve. So now add to that, do you want to use a less effective weapon to defend yourself because you might be sleepy, you might not be dressed right for a UFC fight, in the middle of the night, 3:30 in the morning, you're groggy.
You like, shit.
A bat has its place, right? But do you really want to get that close to somebody because you don't know what they have? If they have a knife, or if they have a stick, a bat, something.
He's changing my mind a little bit.
Tasers are great. Tasers are a great weapon. However, tasers rely on a reaction to the central nervous system. So if you're on drugs, you don't get the same reaction. That's why if you look at videos, a lot of guys who have been tased have been shot afterwards because the taser failed or didn't work or the leads didn't connect. If you get both leads in firmly, it's more than likely you're going to get a nice effect. But if you get one in, one out,
things that shoot out of the taser.
The leads are the prongs, right? The metal prongs that have to pierce the skin to conduct the electric current comes back to the wire. So if one in is one out, you're not getting the same effect. And if I'm wearing layers or if I'm wearing leather, if I'm wearing something heavy, it's not necessarily going to penetrate because these aren't like bullets, they're just darts. And so if the dart doesn't get through, you don't have the effect. And now, if you're going to protect your life with a weapon like that, I think you want something that you know is going to be effective. You don't have to say, well, hey, can you take off your jacket so I can tase you because it's not going to work out otherwise. That leather looks a little thick. that's why I advocate for the most efficient weapon. And sometimes this weapon could be a deterrent. It doesn't necessarily have to be all about taking lives, but it has to be about efficiently defending lives and being confident that the weapon you choose is going to do the job, even if you're not at your best, even if you're not ready for a boxing match or a wrestling match at 4:30 in the morning. These will do the job.
But then how do you sort of weigh that against the risk of a gun getting into the wrong hands, especially if you're someone who has kids? Like
10 or 15,000 different models of gun safes, gun boxes, gun locks, things that you can do. And what you have to do really is temper and balance how much layers of security you put between you and the gun versus how much danger you think you might be in.
Right.
So I'll put it this way. If you're a typical family and you don't think you really have any enemies and you're going about your business and you have a gun in the house for self-protection, right? Maybe you keep the gun and the ammunition separate and you keep the gun in a safe, and it takes you a few steps to get to that weapon if something were to happen. But you have a relatively low threat environment, right? Now, let's take another extreme. If you're a woman who just got out of an abusive relationship and the guy tends to show up at your house unannounced and drunk and violent, maybe you want that thing loaded and highly accessible, right? But if you have kids, you have to be careful about that too. So maybe it's in a gun box that's secure, maybe with a code, but it's loaded. You know, you have to balance these things. The other piece is that I encourage people to start teaching your kids about gun safety as soon as they're able to start grasping it. You know, like I'm starting to teach my daughter about gun safety as she's 5. We do it with the Nerf guns. We play the same safety rules with the Nerf guns like she eventually will with the real gun. So we say, don't point the Nerf gun at Poppy. We're only gonna put our finger on the trigger when we're ready to shoot. And that's what we'll get into.
Yeah, so since you mentioned, you know, those safety protocols and things, you know, you have 3 guns laid out on the table, which can be a little bit intimidating. But I know you wanna, you know, one of the things that GrimTac does is trains people in those safety protocols as well as in how to use these, right?
Correct.
So you know, if you could just give us a little demo on how to do all of that. Let's just start, you know, and we're gonna take a break in a couple minutes.
Right.
But if we could just start off right now, you could just walk us through some safety basics, and then after the break, we can actually go into loading, unloading, maybe things like that.
My pleasure. All right. So the first thing we want to cover, and I do this with people I train, I send them safety rules before they even meet me. You know, when they schedule an appointment for training, I shoot them out a list of things they'll need to bring, and also just the 4 main basic safety rules for handling weapons. The first is assume all weapons are loaded, or treat all weapons as if they are loaded, and that's one of the reasons why normally when I lay out weapons, I would have the ejection ports open so that you could see that they're open, but I want to demonstrate to you guys how we're going to get there first. Second is we never point the weapon at anything we're not willing to destroy, right? So that's also known as, you might have heard the term,
Listen to wait.
yeah, you might have heard the term muzzle discipline. That's what that refers to. We actively avoid pointing the weapon at anything that we don't intend to shoot, right? Third is we never put our finger on the trigger until our sights are aligned and we're ready to fire, right? When we get to advanced stages, we'll talk more about leveling the weapon and prepping the trigger, but for basic safety, no fingers on the trigger until you're ready to shoot. And the last thing is always know your target. Be sure of your target and what lies beyond it, right? Because ammunition has a penetration factor and skill levels vary. So, and even for law enforcement, that's an important distinction to make, right? One of the reasons why I became a firearms instructor and tried to really upgrade my skills with shooting was that I didn't want to be afraid to take shots that I needed to take for fear of missing and hurting someone, right? Because every round you miss in qualification could be a bystander's life.
Yes.
And every round you miss in qualification, you don't necessarily know where it goes. So you have to be skilled enough to put the rounds where you want them to go. So if somebody's taking a little kid hostage and he's got a gun and he's telling me, hey, you better drop that gun or I'm going to shoot you, I'm only talking with that guy long enough to line that shot and take him off that kid. Now, if I'm not proficient with my firearm, I can't take that shot. So now I've got to barter, negotiate, figure out what I'm going to do because I'm not confident. I don't want to shoot a kid.
Right.
I don't want the bullet to go stray, right? So I have to be confident, and I am confident that I could take and make that shot every time, but that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of training, a lot of
This
practice.
conversation is actually getting amazing. We got to take a quick break. We're going to take a minute break for all the viewers out there. If you got questions, if you want to know, when we come back, we're going to show y'all everything. We're going to start getting into this demo. See, normally I use AR-15s and stuff where I'm from, but, you know, this one I have to do for now. You feel me? We're going to take a break. Be back in 60 seconds. What, man? First of all, bro, I don't play that. I don't know if you know who I am. I'm J.O. from the Hood Morning Podcast, all right? And I'm not going for none of that BS you talking about.
Damn, it's like that.
Shit. Hey, P, you want...
Nah, you was just talking that tough shit. I ain't got nothing to do with that.
Hold on, I'll be right back.
Hey, this is Wayne, the asset from Grimtack.com. I'm chilling with Valiz and J.O. Gotta Chill on the Hood Morning Podcast. Defend what you love. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is basically open these up so you can see that they are not loaded, right? And all I'm doing is racking the slide and open up the ejection port.
How do we see that they're not loaded? How do we know?
Look, there's no bullet.
In the chamber, right, there would be something in here. You'd see the back of a round here.
Can you turn to our camera?
Yeah, sure. So you see there's no bullet in the chamber, right? That's where the round would get locked in. And we also see that there's no source of ammunition, right? So that means we have an unloaded weapon. That's the same for all three of these. This is the preferred condition in polite gun society that you want to hand someone a weapon, right? So I'm going to hand you a weapon, right? Unloaded, right? Unloaded, okay, and unloaded. Now remember, like we said, the first thing we're going to do is not point the muzzle at anybody we don't want to shoot, right? So we're just going to point these down.
Yeah, Val. I don't trust you. It was an accident. I really didn't.
It's unloaded. How much damage could I do?
Yeah, and
Say it again. Say something.
so the way these weapons work is basically this is a semi-automatic firearm. Now don't get fooled into a popular phrase that we hear in the news lately is full semi-automatic, right? That's not a thing.
Okay.
There are fully automatic weapons and there are semi-automatic weapons. There's no full semi-automatic weapon. If it's semi-automatic, it is what it is. Fully automatic weapons are machine guns. They've been highly regulated since 1986, right? You can't get one unless you buy one that's grandfathered for like $80,000. There's only a few left in the States, and we can't import them. So those are the guns where you press the trigger and the gun just keeps shooting until it's empty, right? With these, you press the trigger one time, you get one bullet. That's what semi-automatic means. As opposed to like a revolver, right? Cowboy action gun, where you're manually pulling the trigger, your physical force is what's cocking the hammer and letting it go forward. So that's not semi-automatic, because after you do that, you're gonna have to exert more physical force to get another round. With this, once you fire a round, the cycling of the weapon preps itself to fire another round, whether you pull the trigger or not. It's not gonna shoot the round, but it's gonna be ready, all right?
All right.
And that's basically how these work. So I'm just going to ask you both to close up your weapons by taking a slide over the top like this, pulling it back, and just letting it go. Okay?
What am I doing wrong?
Boy, you're embarrassing me, man. I told you don't
Training
know nothing
day.
about
It's
no-
okay.
Yo,
But
man.
first, you want to take your finger off the trigger there, right?
Oh, yeah.
She ready to shoot.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
she's
sorry,
ready.
When
I'm
I said
sorry.
that in my whole kneecap.
I'm failing right
That's what
now.
women do. They get squeezed.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not fair.
So it's the side thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot
Okay.
about that. Okay.
All right.
All right.
So now these are closed up. If they were loaded, they'd be ready to go, because with that forward motion of the slide, you pick up a round off the top of the magazine. Okay. So it scoops it up, places it in the barrel. So you potentially have 9 down here, 1 in the chamber, right?
Okay.
1 in the chamber, another common phrase, right? That's when you know the weapon is ready to go. None of these weapons have external manual safeties, right? Because some of them come with switches where you
Right.
can switch it.
The thingy on the end? Like that?
That's the hammer.
Oh, okay.
Manual safety would be another switch back here somewhere that would prevent the gun from firing even if you press the trigger. I'm not a fan of those because it's one more step
You gotta take the
to take to protect yourself. And if you forget and you're pulling the trigger and, wait a minute, I forgot to switch, that's not a good thing. To me, I rather train safely. In other words, I want to keep my finger off the trigger at all times. And if I go to the trigger, I need as many rounds as quickly as possible, right?
Okay.
Because that means my life is in danger.
Okay.
So,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So when a round goes off and you fire a semi-automatic weapon, it's locked in the chamber, right? Because the locking block is in the back, the round is in the front, so a little explosion takes place. The primer, which is like the detonating ingredient, burns the gunpowder off and an explosion happens. Now, the explosion happens in all directions.
You're making me nervous.
Yeah.
Can we get some paper towels? Sweating.
When a round goes off, the explosion takes place in all directions. But because the round is locked from the back and there's a tube out the front, that's the only place the bullet can go, right? So when a bullet goes out the front, the rest of the force from this explosion forces to slide backwards, right? Okay, now you'll see there's a little hook in here. See that little piece right there?
Right.
And you'll see there's another piece right here. See that? There's a little hook thing right there.
Gotcha.
Okay, those are the extractor and the ejector.
Okay.
So basically there's a little claw.
Let's turn that again. Turn it that way real quick so the camera can get it.
Yeah, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but on top of the slide right there, this piece right here, extractor, that piece right there,
50 rounds
ejector. There's a little claw basically that pulls the empty brass backwards, and it pings off this little spike and jumps out the only place it could go, the ejection port, right? So that gets rid of your spent brass. And as we said, we already know that when the slide cycles backwards, it wants to go forwards, right? Because there's a spring. And when it comes forward, what do we just say happens? Picks up a round, places it in the chamber, right? So that's the basics of how this works. Now, I'm going to ask you all to point your weapons over there, which is relatively safe direction, more or less. And
Everybody move out the side. Cool, man.
Everybody with the cameras moving.
You feel me?
That's how cameramen feel in the
Grand
video.
Theft Auto.
Okay.
okay, so now Val, you should see a green dot inside the window there.
Yes.
Josh, you should be seeing a red dot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In between the two rear sights. Okay, so you're gonna line those up so they're flat across the top, even side to side, so that red one is right in the center.
Yep.
So now you are all good to go, right?
Ready to shoot him.
That's basically your sight picture. Okay. And what we want to do when we shoot is try to disturb that as little as possible by pressing the trigger slowly and evenly, right? So I'm going to ask you all, since we're all prepped, go ahead and put your finger on the trigger and just slowly apply rearward pressure until you hear the click. All right, got it.
Rookie.
Very steady. Okay. So now you can put those down. That's basically what that feels like.
Put it down.
That's crazy. Crazy.
Now, Josh, if you want to put yours down, I'm going to show you mine, which is a little bit of a different look. Because she already shot the optic. I want you to try this one, which is the electronic optic. So you did the iron sights.
All right.
This has an electronic dot. So go ahead and pick it up. Again,
Oh, this look crazy. Oh, wow.
finger off the trigger, please.
Yeah, of
Right?
course. What is that? Though?
There you
That
go.
This
You
is
look like you're having too much
what
fun
we
with
call
this.
a
It's
duty.
making me nervous.
Hey, yo, what? We say good morning. All right. Mm-hmm. Nah, yeah, that's cool.
All right. So you see the difference.
What? You're not missing nothing with that.
Yeah, so the difference is iron sights, two focal planes, right? Rear sights, there's two. Front sight, and you see how you had to line those
Right,
up,
right.
right? So in order to do an accurate shot, they've got to be lined up together. Now, what you saw and what you saw afterwards was red dot or green dot, single focal plane. All you do is look through the window, put the dot on the thing that you want to shoot, press the trigger. It's easier.
Do these guns come with that feature, or is that added on?
That's something you add on.
Mod.
Because it's modular,
Duty.
and guns generally come stock with iron sights. You buy an optic and you have it applied, or you put it on. But that represents a great step forward in gun technology, because I spent most of my law enforcement career shooting iron sights, right? And what they tell you is, to be accurate as possible, you have to focus on the front sight,
Yeah.
and your target should be blurry in the background. So what does that mean in terms of me assessing the behavior of a person?
Right.
Not so good, right? Because I'm focused on my sight. So by the time the gun is out with an iron sight, I'm deciding whether to shoot based on limited information.
Yeah.
Because in order to take an accurate shot, I've got to focus on the sight. But in order to determine whether I should shoot, I got to focus on the person. So now I'm jumping back and forth, right? Now with the better technology, I'm just looking through a window, both eyes open. I see the dot. I can see the person very clearly. I don't need to focus on the dot.
Okay.
I see what's happening in the background, so I can make my assessment. So if I say drop the knife and he drops the knife,
You don't gotta shoot him.
then I know.
Right.
But if the situation evolves, I can still take an accurate shot by never losing focus on the person or the threat. That's an underrated aspect of these. I think most of the time people view these optics as really cool toys, but they actually have much more use than that in terms of defending lives and being accurate and professional in terms of when we take shots.
I don't want to bring us off course or anything, but real quick, I just want to know: do police officers have those optics on the guns that they carry generally?
Some do and some don't. It's really a newer technology, so you're finding a lot of police departments are adopting them,
Okay.
but it's going to take several years before it really becomes a standard, just like backup cameras on cars, right?
Right. Okay.
It's the best practice, but it's just taking time to take hold.
Gotcha.
So,
right,
that's
so
your
what's next?
that's your basic safety operation. I'm also going to show you all how to load, right?
Okay.
Loading is obviously one of the critical environments. So I ask you to pick up your weapons again. Now this time we closed up the barrels, but just to be sure, because I'm rigid about safety, because I handle guns every day, we want to have safety redundancies plugged in. So we're going to make the weapons open and safe. So I'm going to ask you to grab the slide, pull it back, and push that small lever up. Use your thumb to push that small lever up. It's going to be right here.
This lever, yeah.
That one right there.
This one.
Yep. So push that up when it gets all the way back. There you go. You got it? Got it?
Yeah. Child.
You got it, Val?
I'm struggling.
Yeah, that one's tough.
Need me to load it for you? It's like, man, it's like, nah. That wasn't that.
It's
That was a
hurting
little
my
difficult.
thumb.
That's all right.
Anybody
Here.
watching on live,
Take
loading
this
a
one
gun
for
is
now.
really, that's kind of
I'll
difficult
take
if
that
you're
one.
not really used to doing
Yeah,
it.
it's okay.
Yeah, that was work out. See how I just said it was difficult? You see how you did? How often did you work out? 'Cause I ain't gonna, before I met you, I was
Ready to ride, they got 'em alive. Hey, I know killers that tatted their eyes. Hey, I know dealers move work in disguise. Hey, I got bitches that play on the side, they got 'em alive. Amen. I got bitches that won't play the side. I got killers that won't test their eyes. I got niggas that's ready to ride, they got 'em alive. I'm the one you gotta deal with. Give it to 'em cause it's real shit. Yellow buses, I don't feel shit. Get the bustin' niggas like a field trip. Double cup and fuck a Robitussin cause you know a nigga flow is still sick. I need that back for some millions. Your pussy, I just want a little bit.
Will rise, right? The chances that you're going to be in a life-threatening encounter is like less than 1 in 1,000 even, and you're going to be in altercations, arguments, things like that, confrontations 10,000 times before you ever need a gun. So this is a level of preparedness that is very finite, but there are other things that you could do, such as having environmental awareness. Like we teach a personal defense course where we talk about victim type behaviors, like staring at your phone when you're walking, going to the ATM too late at night, and things like that you can avoid to keep yourself out of those situations. Now, tasers and pepper spray do have a place. They're just, in my estimation, not quite as efficient for home defense. But if you wanted to have something that's less lethal, yeah, pepper spray is super painful. I've been sprayed, I think, 4 times.
Yep.
I actually
Twice
sprayed
as a-
myself by accident with pepper spray
Yeah.
one time. I just
It's no joke. I mean,
don't
Slap
add.
dick.
It
What's
was
wrong
it
with
ruined
you?
my whole
And
day.
what, 4 times? What the
Well,
fuck? Like, after the first time, I'm like, no, we ain't doing that shit again. We're not doing it again.
Yeah.
We're not doing it again.
I did it once in each academy, and once each time I
No,
became a
sir.
defensive
I'd be
tactics
like,
instructor.
Sir, I did this in
Yeah.
the last class.
Yeah, I tried to get a pass, but they were like, no dice.
So my fear is, and kind of back to what we were talking about, my fear is the guy with the bad temper that may have had 7 shots of Hennessy. Now he's upset, and an argument that would never have gone that far as someone losing their life, that now comes back into fruition with these guns. Like a lot of people have been saying to me, because we've been posting questions and people have been kind of commenting with me, and it's just like, guns are cool, but if we don't have them, a lot of issues, don't arise. We don't have mass shootings. We don't have this. We don't have that. So, I don't know. I kind of just feel like, let's see what the world's like for a year without guns. Just taken away from
Yeah,
everybody.
but how do you even get there? That's the problem, right? Like, how do we get to the point where? Because I agree with you. Like, in principle, I'm personally of the opinion that the whole world would be better off if there were no such thing as guns. A lot of historical events.
Slavery would not have happened without
wouldn't
guns.
wouldn't have been able to happen, exactly. But that's not the world that we live in. We live in a world where there are guns. We live in a country where there are a lot of guns, and most people in this country
Have 'em.
who have guns are the kinds of people that I don't really necessarily feel comfortable with them having guns and me not having one. Like that's really like a driving force behind why I even got interested in this. I mean, I don't know.
See, Hoyt sounding more like me.
Yeah. Hoyt starting the elevator. You know what happened at the end of the movie, though? You shot me in the ass. Putting cases on all you sons of bitches.
But okay, so going back to the process, because I want to make sure that we're clear on that. Where do you go? Like I would if I had my phone right now, I would just Google get a gun in New Jersey and maybe like a website. Do you know like the actual website though that you go to? Is it like the state website?
Yeah, I have the link. And I'll share it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but
Okay.
it's a link to the New Jersey State Police website.
Because that is the first process, right? Just go
Yes,
online.
that's the
and fill out
first thing, is fill out the application.
And
Yeah.
I've heard that people are waiting a really long time lately. I don't know, because of COVID or because of just events that are increasing demand for guns.
Yeah, the pandemic has had an effect where a lot of dealers are out of stock of different guns because people, when people recognize that there's a financial crisis and that resources might be limited, they start to fear that people will try to take what they have, so they want to protect themselves. So a lot of people who were not gun owners went out and got guns over the past 3 months. I think they said in April, the NICS system experienced the highest single month of background checks for gun sales in the history of NICS.
Yeah.
It was like 7 million in a month or
What
something
is
like
NICS?
that. NICS is the crime index system
Okay.
that they have to do. Once you get your permit, when you go to the store to buy a gun, they do another instantaneous check because if the process takes a few months for you to get your permit, they want to make sure that between then and now you haven't robbed a bank.
Right.
So when you go to the store, they do
That makes sense.
a less expansive check to make sure that you're still the same legal status to have it. That system is very backed up.
Because otherwise you could be like, yeah, I robbed the bank, but that was after my application.
Right,
went through.
Exactly.
you
So
can't
I'm
hold it against
grandfathered.
me.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Insta checks are backed up right now. I think the last person I talked to, he said they were around 1,000 backed up and it was taking about 5 days. Normally, you get that done in 30 to 40 minutes while you're at the store.
Yeah.
Right now, places are calling people back. And the federal guideline says that if I do a background check on you and I don't get an answer from the feds in 3 days,
Yeah.
I may proceed with the sale. Like I'm not liable
Oh,
because you
okay.
didn't answer me. But they've been issuing a lot of cautions now saying that, look, the system is overloaded. If you start giving out guns to people, we can't be responsible for what's going to happen. And I think what you do for one, you have to do for all. So if we're going to let you have it, then we have to just start passing them out. And I think stores and dealers are uncomfortable with that. So they're asking people to be patient and wait based on the environment, which I think is reasonable as long as they are diligent in getting it done. You know, because like we say, justice delayed is justice denied. If you have a right to have something and somebody delays it, then essentially they're banning you from having it.
Okay, understood.
So I'm okay. I think what I want to talk about, or want to ask, is what's the right way to shoot somebody, and what's the wrong way? Because I know in the past, and I've read articles where they're like, oh, he was turned away from you and you shot him, and that's why you did 30 years, or it could be like, you know what I mean? So I feel like is there, because that's my fears. Again, you come in my house, I shot you because you came in my house, but because I didn't maybe shoot you in your legs first, you know what I'm saying? That, it's an issue. Or I know Dave Chappelle talked about it too, having to load different types of bullets to shoot people with. It was crazy.
Well, that's a good point. And there's always, understand this, if you shoot someone in your house, there's always going to be cops involved. There's always going to be lawyers involved. There's always going to be a process. Especially in New Jersey, it's very rare that you're going to have a shooting and the police are going to show up and say, looks good to me, let's go, and just drag the body out. We just don't operate that
So you're
way.
going to jail in that circumstance.
No, it's not necessarily that you're going to
situation,
jail,
I'm cool on that.
but there's going to be an investigation.
Right.
And
Good to me.
you always have to articulate your position and why you did what you did.
Right,
Right.
of course.
Whether it was a good shoot, bad shoot, whether you feel you're justified, nervous, and
Because otherwise you could just invite somebody that you don't like to your
Shoot
house
their
and
ass.
shoot
And
them
shoot.
and then say,
Exactly.
That'd be the
the
new trend, like 12th man shot this week by girlfriend.
yeah.
Right.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. 2 shots to my hand and my foot. You said freeze, then proceeded to squeeze so cold. When it breeze, my nose beginning to leak. Hold on, I feel a heat. One more, my lower cheek, my back turned to the street. No strapping, arm reach. I'm black, I'm low key. Why they leave me in these cold streets? I'm thinking no justice, no peace. I feel my eyes rolling back in my mind. I see my mind.
Is some of the misconceptions that you would like to clear up and some gun control measures that either are in place or have been proposed that you think maybe don't make as much sense as they might sound from a common sense standpoint?
Yes, ma'am. One of the first things is terminology. We've had a conversation before about if you're going to have a conversation about astronomy, you've got to know what planets and stars and galaxies are, right? And if we're going to have a conversation about guns, then we have to know what semi-automatic, fully automatic, what those things mean. Now, in the modern era, you have politicians and media inserting a lot of buzzwords that sound good into gun culture that aren't really accurate. So you have terms like military style and assault weapon and military grade, and those aren't really things.
Okay.
Right?
There's I hear them all the time.
Yeah.
There's not really a such thing as an assault weapon. Now, if you're referring to like a military term of assault weapon, then you're talking about a fully automatic weapon, right? And we know we can't get those. So those are off the table, so that's not a thing. To assault someone is a verb, right? So a weapon can't be an assault weapon any more than it could be an assault knife. It's just a knife, right?
Right. Until you assault somebody.
Right, exactly. Assault is the action you take.
I'm just looking for butter.
Yeah, it's a steak knife until you stab somebody, and it's an assault knife. So the other piece is this military style and weapons of war, and military grade or military style or military spec simply refers to components of a weapon being made to a certain spec so that they're interchangeable with other military equipment, more or less, right? Like a buffer tube, which is the back of a rifle that holds the stock. Okay, military spec means it has to be this specific diameter so that the stock fits on. If it's not military grade, it may or may not fit. We want one that's military grade because if my other parts are military grade, military spec, I want them to fit together, right? That's all that means. It does not mean super high quality or super good at killing people because, as you know, the government doesn't do anything particularly well, right? And they don't have the fanciest, coolest, highest technology weapons. Right. They buy things that are scalable and reliable and sustainable. That's pretty much it. So you get a government issue weapon, like I've had government issue rifles before. It had optic on it and it was okay, but it wasn't like this super weapon that people are trying to make these things out to be. So military spec is just a term confining the build of the weapon and the functions of the weapon. It doesn't mean that like, oh, you got a military assault rifle. Like that doesn't mean anything in terms of, trust me, most civilian owned weapons, guys who shoot competition or shoot for recreation, their weapons are way nicer than military grade weapons because they spend real money and they pick their own parts. They don't get issued a weapon, they select a weapon. The other piece is, in my estimation, the reason so many kids got killed is because nobody had weapons to defend those kids.
Okay,
right?
So you're in favor of guns in schools?
To a degree, I am, because I look at it this way. If you tried to break into the Academy Awards, Val, they would pin you down and you'd have 100 guns pointed at you, right? Because they have armed security for all these celebrities, right? But our kids don't get that benefit. Why is it that it's so important that we not invade a public function with celebrities to the point where you be detained, arrested, and have guns pointed at you, but if you come into school to kill a kid, it's not a problem?
But so my fear with having guns in schools, I mean, and there are different ways to go about it. I mean, some people think that teachers should have guns. I have really strong feelings against that because that puts, I think, teachers in a bad situation. And another way of going about it is to have armed guards. And even then, there are two different ways to go about it there. There's security guards having guns versus having an armed guard whose sole purpose is to stop an active shooter. And like the only way to go about it that makes any sense to me is that last one, an armed guard whose sole purpose and the only way that they're allowed to ever get involved in anything is if there's an active shooter situation. Because otherwise what you end up with is if it's like a security guard, I mean we've seen, whether you're looking at police roughing people up unnecessarily, or even there have been a lot of videos released recently of actual security guards in school roughing up kids unnecessarily. Like, what's to stop this armed guard from pulling a gun on a kid in school who's getting too rowdy, who's being disrespectful? Because we know that there are security guards and as there are police officers who have these knee-jerk reactions to go overboard and pull a gun on somebody. God forbid that somebody is a kid at school.
I think even more simple than that, though, it's about location. We're not talking about a high school where it's, predominantly white students. We're talking about Trenton High, Plainfield High, some of these urban areas. You got so much more negative that could come from allowing that gun to be in school. Because what is that security guard going to do when 25, kids from the projects decide, fuck that, we're going to beat his ass and take his gun today? You understand? Like, I just feel like, again, it's not a need for that. And I think keep our schools. Yeah, you need security guards, obviously, to break up fights and things of that nature. But I think once you start bringing in armed security, I feel like it takes that mindset away. And in our school systems and the school system that our children go to, that's the last thing I want to add to their experience. I want them to actually go to school and focus on school and not have to worry about that.
Agreed. Let me give you a unique sort of idea. In New York City, part of the NYPD is called the Hercules Unit, right? And their sole purpose is to roam around and protect the monuments, right? The Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, and obviously they need to get up to the Statue of Liberty by boat, but the Wall Street Bull. And all they do is go from monument to monument, making sure that these things are okay. And if there's an incident at one of these places, there's going to be a regular response, and they're going to respond also. My idea would be to have a similar setup for schools, right? One, there are a lot of vets who need employment.
That's a good point.
And you don't necessarily have to have your security in the school. If you have a roving unit of, say, two guys, two highly trained guys who are retired in a car, and they could only cover an area to where they could get to every school in their particular zone in under 2 minutes. And they don't have any interaction, right? You might know who they are, and they might bring them to, the assembly so people can meet them once in a while. But from a response perspective, they are outside the school, and if they're coming in, it's because there's a problem. I think that is a progressive and effective way to get school security without having people wander the halls of the schools on a normal day with guns.
But then doesn't that sort of go back to what you said earlier about the wait time between when something happens and when you actually call the police and they get there?
Let me answer this one. Within those 2 minutes, though, that's why you said that, within that certain zone. So you're saying maybe those two guys within that zone, and then once it gets to a certain place, that's another zone. That way everybody can cover those areas within that time.
So then, what would be the not the restriction, but like what would be a reasonable limit, like a geographic limitation on that in order to actually make it effective?
Oh, you could figure that out, but it's going to vary by jurisdiction. Because in some places, in Manhattan, you have a school every 8 blocks, but in places in Jersey, you may not have. One team might be assigned to one school in a rural area because there's just not another school that they could cover that's close enough.
Right.
But that
would get pricey though. Right? Like that would cost every district money to put one of those units there and actually train. These would have to be very well trained people, right? So we're talking not only appointing people to the special task force, but making sure that they're constantly training as often as you do. You said you fire off 800 to 1,000 rounds a month.
Well, I got the solution for you. I'll tell you how we're going to pay for it, right? Okay? We're going to stop the war on drugs. Because we spend in this country $53 billion a year to catch 2% of all illegally trafficked drugs, right? So if we cut that bullshit out and filter those funds over to protecting children in our schools, because first of all, no country has ever been successful in eradicating a drug problem through enforcement and detention.
We'll take us to break. We come
All right, let's take one last break, and then we got a couple more quick issues that we're gonna touch on, and then we're gonna wrap up.
144. You hear the ice, nigga? Just got feel this pain from. God bless. If this a heaven, then I'm grateful. Until then, I pay dues. Pray to Yeshua. What if the plug named Jesus? Diamonds colored gray goose. I know it's hard to say thank you. Always finish your plate before you start to say your grace too. Can't be walking around without it on you when they hate you. Can't be walking around with it on you just to play cool.
Which is the intersection of where we are today with gun control measures, with guns in general, and with police brutality, and how that whole scene has gotten national attention now, and what we should be doing about policing when it comes to guns, when it comes to individuals getting shot, when it comes to all those kinds of things that everybody's looking at right now.
Well, I think one of the things we have to realize is that we have to renormalize as a black community the use of our Second Amendment rights. Because right now, it's such an oddity for a black person to have a gun if they're not a criminal, right? And you're not gonna see black professionals with guns on the news because they're not getting in trouble.
Right.
So that's why I go to great lengths to show myself on Instagram and Facebook and other minorities. I would say I'm the most diverse Second Amendment page on social media because I regularly show women, men, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, shooting
Families.
guns, doing what they do. And some other people, there's very few, but are starting to take hold of that same perspective. Because if you went to Texas and you were Houston PD and you pull over a young white guy in a truck and he says, "Officer, now you know I got a gun in the back," that's not shocking to you, right? But if you were to pull over a black guy and he was like, "Officer, I got weapon," well, you do, because
I mean, we saw that play out with Philando Castile. All he did was say, "Officer, I just want to let you know I have a gun. I'm registered." And next thing you know, he's dead.
So, and the question
front of a
is,
kid.
why was that police officer so nervous? Because it hasn't been normalized for him that black people carry guns. So every black person that gets a gun makes it safer for the next black person to have a gun, because we're normalizing that imagery. We're normalizing that culture. Right?
All that weird.
So the better we are at normalizing that and making that overriding imagery, the less shocking it'll be to law enforcement, the military, the public at large when they see a black person with a gun, because I think we've done a job of delineating it for ourselves. Black people stay away from guns because they don't want to be labeled as thugs or criminals. So it's like either you're an intelligent, law-abiding black citizen or you're a criminal thug with a gun. And there's no in between. If you pick up a gun, now you're on the thug side. You know?
Got 6 master's degrees, but he's a
Oh, he's a thug. You want your do-rag with that?
Right.
Right. And those same presumptions don't apply when it comes to white people carrying.
Exactly. You could be a white professional and it's no, I shoot competition. I mean, very intelligent, well-spoken people on both sides carry guns, but we're just not providing that exposure, and this goes back to my, one of my posts promoting this. I talked about revolutionary spirit. People have to realize that in the 60s, the whole reason gun control, which is racist, started was because the Black Panthers in 1967 went to the California Capitol with loaded rifles and handguns, and they had an issue with corruption and they wanted to make themselves known, and they went to the Capitol and they were met by a police officer from the Capitol Police who read a pre-prepared statement and said, you will be allowed to keep your guns as long as you don't, cause any trouble. That was it. And he walked around with them for the rest of the day, carrying their rifles over their shoulders, guns in holsters and all that, and it was not a problem. However, Ronald Reagan freaked out and said, we got to get the guns out of the hands of these black people. And the NRA helped him pass the Mulford Act, which eventually led to the ban of carrying loaded weapons in public. And then led to the Gun Control Act of 1968, which started to outlaw, oddly enough, things that were common in black communities, like this, what they call a Saturday night special, like a very inexpensive .38 revolver that people use for self-protection. Well, now, we can't get those anymore. And other types of guns that were prevalent in minority communities. And that fast forwards all the way to today, where you see that the strictest gun control is always in places like Chicago and New York, where it's predominantly urban minority communities, and you can't have guns, but there's a shooting every day. Who's doing all the shooting? If you're a law, exactly. You're a law.
Where can people find you at? Shout yourself out on Instagram.
Grimtac, GRMTAC on Instagram. I'm on Facebook at grimtac.usa, or you could just search it. Grimtac on Twitter. Grimtac.com is my website. You can train. You can organize self-defense. I do self-defense seminars. I also do some professional security training for people who are involved in either executive protection or general security. But mostly what I do is train individuals, pairs, and groups to shoot, to handle weapons safely. I can help you with, if you have questions about the application process, if you have questions about what kind of weapon to select or how to store it, I can help you with all those things. So I'm always available.
Listen, 2 things. I want to thank you for coming, spending time with us. This is for you because you need it. Nah, listen, man, we out of time. That was crazy. We're gonna have you stick around and ask some more questions, maybe. Val, you want to say anything? No. Okay, so we good. No, I'm playing. Good. No, I'm playing.
I appreciate you coming. Like I said.
Listen, man. Tune in. Y'all know how we do this thing. Hood morning, have a hood afternoon, and hood weekend to put two. No. Yo, y'all be safe, man. Peace.
Business is business. I ask for forgiveness. That's just how the door. I'm handling business. I'm still independent. I'm still in the trenches. While you still in the trap with that gun in your lap, like your heart got a vengeance. Business is business. And you fucking these women. I might need some repentance. I threw diamonds and pendants. I'll go like a Simpson. My niggas